Welcome to Your Music Saved Us, where two friends blast ourselves into the past to relive and recontextualize the alternative Christian music we grew up listening to in the 1990s. My name is Jay, and with me is a self-proclaimed mental giant, Clifton. Clifton, how are you?
That's true, especially back then. I would definitely, like I said, I'm yeah. All right, I'm doing good.
I'm not sure that's what that meant, but we'll get into it on the song in a minute. But before, what are we listening to this week, Clifton?
We're listening to the middle, sometimes ignored release by Black Eyed Sceva called 5 Years, 50,000 Miles Davis, which is an EP.
Where were you able to listen to this?
It isn't available through Bandcamp or any of the streaming platforms. Some of it was on YouTube, but for example, like Soapbox wasn't. So I uploaded all of this to our YouTube channel so everyone can hear it in high quality.
Thank you. And 5 Minute Walk Records, I know you're not around anymore, but it'd be great if you put your stuff up anywhere.
Yeah, Frank. Get on it, Frank.
Well, Clifton, tell us a little bit about Black Eyed Sceva.
All right. So I'm going to tell you about the band, and then I'm going to try to tell you about the band, I think. Like their story, and then like how people viewed them. So of all the episodes we've done, there is, well, not a lot written, but of all the things written about this band, 90% of it is what people think about the band, and 0% of it is about the band.
Uh-huh.
Which is to say that, like, people love this band. The people who love this band love this band. And they're all out there sharing their opinions on it and saying that they love it and all that kind of stuff. But there's very little. We found 2 interviews, which is kind of surprising, honestly. And then I think we have the 5 Minute Walk write-up on them, and that's about it, honestly. Yeah.
And the promo video, Clifton, come on.
Okay, so I did watch, there's a promo video about Black Eyed Sceva, and if I mispronounce this, forgive me, because my entire life I've always pronounced it Sceva, which is wrong, but it's Black Eyed Sceva. I tried to watch that to learn some stuff about them, but it turns out they're just a bunch of huge assholes, well, smart asses, really. So didn't learn anything about that, although there is one portion of the video where Black Eyed Sceva is playing rock music to a congregation of elderly Russians in a church, and it's kind of wonderfully awkward, just like to see these like old babushkas just sitting there, kind of like.
Well, and it looks like the stage is like
so far
yards.
away.
Yeah, from where they're sitting, and then everyone is just sitting.
Yeah,
and a few are clapping, and most are just sitting staring at them. It's incredibly awkward and strange.
Yeah. Okay, so the band formed in 1991 or so in Santa Barbara, California, which is up the coast a bit from LA. And for their entire run, Black Eyed Sceva was Jeremy Post on guitar and vocals, Brad McCarter on bass, and Brent Nims on drums. At the time of this release, they range in age from about 23 to 26. And a lot of what I'm going to tell you from this point on comes from an interview that Jay found with Brad and Jeremy from the Lighthouse Electronic Magazine. A lot of things were called electronic magazines in the early days of the internet because they didn't know how else to refer to them, I guess. The magazine was just such an important part of the human history. Anyways, we'll link to that in the show notes. So I'll let Brad tell us a little bit here about the beginnings of the band. He said, Jeremy and Brent were playing in a secular group, which was folk rock, by the way, here in the area, and were dissatisfied about where that was going and what they were putting their efforts towards. So they decided that they wanted to play music which would ultimately glorify God. They ran across me through a mutual friend who saw me playing bass at church. And they got started playing in the club scene in Santa Barbara. Brad once again said, there are no Christian venues in Santa Barbara except for a youth group or something. We haven't played in Santa Barbara for a while. We'd like to be playing more here. This is right after their first album came out, by the way, this interview. Actually, there is one Christian venue, Westmont College. If anything, there's a handful of people up there who are interested. Back when we were playing in town a lot, we were doing the usual club scene here. We played pretty much every club in Santa Barbara a couple of times. This band is a band that plays live a lot and toured a lot. In 1994, thereabouts, they all moved into a house together in Santa Barbara, which they nicknamed the Mothership, after a previous house that some of them lived in called the Mothership. Talking about the local club scene in Santa Barbara, Brad said, "It's interesting. People respond really positively until they hear any kind of gospel message in it, which is really unfortunate. We made it a point not to be the band that comes out with a message so strong that people just run out the door. Otherwise, why'd you present it at all? But at the same time, to present it clearly. There were people who were definitely into it, but nobody's going to sit around buying more beers and saying, 'Yeah, party,' to a band that's got Jesus Christ in the lyrics. It's as much as you can play in a scene where nobody can be wholeheartedly into songs which go against their whole lifestyle and what they believe. More than likely, even if they like the music, they won't like the band." The name Black Eyed Sceva comes from a story in Acts 19. I'll let Jeremy explain that here. He said, "I try to think of the most obscure verse in the New Testament. I've read that story 100 times, and I never stopped to think what was going on there. I just passed right over the whole verse. I was thinking one day, how come I've never noticed this story? I'm sure there's a lot more to this story than just the 5 lines in the Bible." Then we had a bunch of potential band names, and I said, "How about Black Eyed Sceva?" And it just stuck. At first we thought it was kind of ridiculous, but we didn't really care. I'm glad it was that name. None of the other names would have worked quite as well as Black Eyed Sceva, and it's great because everyone asks you what it's about, and anytime you get someone to open their Bible, even if it's something that obscure, maybe they'll fall onto something else. About the same time in 1994, probably, Mikey Bridges from Sometime Sunday introduced the band to Frank Tate with 5 Minute Walk. And once again, I'll let Jeremy tell this part of the story. Jeremy said, "We were getting checked out by Rex, who had already offered us a deal, and Tooth and Nail and a couple other labels. Frank Tate is an awesome man of God, and it's purely spiritual things. Frank's criteria for getting on the label were so Christ-centered. Any other label we talked to was like, 'Are you going to sell some albums or what?' It was all business. Frank kind of grilled us on it. It wasn't like you had a chance to go study up on it. He would know after the little interview whether you were going to do it for the glory of God or for the glory of yourself. And I've seen him do it since then with other bands. He's had some bands that were really liked, and he had to turn them down because their focus isn't right. That was why we went with 5 Minute Walk. Frank was dead set on signing Grandma Train, so we were out of rotation. He was only going to sign one band. Then he got to us, and Grandma Train went with Forefront, so he said, 'You guys are all right.' Regardless of what happens musically, we've made a friend who is an incredible guy. I didn't get the sense with any of the other labels that we were going to establish an actual friendship. What I enjoyed about hanging out with Frank is that it's not all music. We couldn't be more happy. It's amazing, the kind of support that he gives us." They were actually the second band signed to 5 Minute Walk after Dime Store Profits.
And this is pre 5 Iron Frenzy, because I feel like that's the band that everybody thinks of with 5 Minute Walk because they got the biggest, but this is before
but that
was thinking about them.
Yeah. And 5 Iron Frenzy was early, but not super early, you know.
Right.
And,
not
I mean,
this
there
early.
were
Okay.
Yeah, there were what, 2 Take Time to Listens already out before 5 Iron Frenzy was on 5 Minute Walk. In early 1995, the band released their debut album, Way Before the Flood. The album was well reviewed, but didn't see a lot of sales. And despite touring constantly across the States and Europe, and I mean constantly, they said at one point that they played 200 shows in a year.
Wow.
In 1996, they released their EP, 5 Years, 50,000 Miles Davis. Jeremy said of it, "That was just a little holdover for our next album. We had some issues in the band that were causing us to be unproductive." And that brings us to the date of this album.
It's interesting to think that it could have been Grandma Train instead of this band, which...
Oof, that would have been a disaster.
Yeah, I do like this band more than that. But we'll get into it more in a minute.
And Grandma Train belongs on Forefront.
Yeah, fair. Do you remember when this came into your life? Like, what was your first experience with it?
Yeah, so my memories are a little spotty, although I think I have the overall story mostly correct. I think I found Black Eyed Sceva in my transition period from like corny Stephen Curtis Chapman type music to the punk and alternative that I would grow to love later. Probably around the same time I was listening to like Big Tent Revival or Three Crosses, early 1996 or so. I had Way Before the Flood first. I remember thinking the artwork and the name were cool, but it was only at the smaller Christian bookstore, so I couldn't listen to it before buying it. So I bought it. I liked it. I don't think I really understood it at the time. I didn't listen to it a lot. By the time I noticed 5 Years, 50,000 Miles Davis, and it's great artwork, by the way, I was already listening to Plank Eye and getting into more punk. I don't remember specifically, but I remember being hesitant because I wasn't sure if Way Before the Flood was kind of part of the cheesy part of that transition period or part of, like, the great music of that transition period. But it didn't take long to realize, upon listening to this EP that it was part of the great music of that period, and it was really hearing, the live version of Adrian James on this EP that I realized that I needed to go back and revisit Way Before the Flood. And that was all before not only was that before, Five Iron Frenzy, this was all before I knew what 5 Minute Walk was. So I hadn't even found the first, Take Time to Listen at this point. Although that kind of all happened so quickly, but still, it's in the time period, and I didn't even know what that was yet.
And listen, I never had either of their albums, but I
Mhm.
did have those samplers, and I remembered Ryan's Driveway.
Yeah.
Like that's how much I heard that song and how catchy it was. In fact, I think when you said it before we even started listening to this, like I had parts of it playing in my head, which is
Yeah.
crazy to me because I didn't own this. So I definitely have not heard this in over 20 years.
Yeah, if you've ever heard Ryan's Driveway, I doubt you're gonna forget it.
Yeah, true. So you kind of touched on it, but how'd you feel about this at the time?
I kinda loved it. I listened to it a lot. It was probably, like, the first kind of, like, indie rock album that I ever fell in love with. I didn't call it that at the time, as I mentioned last time, though, referred to it as college rock. Something that I read referred to it as that, probably HM or something like that. So that's how I referred to the style at the time. And, of course, I felt really grown up listening to college rock as a sophomore in high school. I don't think I really appreciated it at the time, but Black Eyed Sceva was probably like, probably laid the foundation for a lot of the music I would listen to, kind of in college and into the present.
We kind of talked about it. I know Ryan's Driveway. Did any other songs kind of stand out in your memories from this band?
Twain!
Okay. And when you hear it, you'll know what he's talking about. Fair.
Yep.
Yeah, I get that. Okay. Any specific memories associated with this album?
You know, it's weird. I don't have any like specific memories, but I do like when I opened the CD and I saw the credit for Jeremy Post, I was like immediately flooded with this memory of the high esteem that I held him in as a songwriter and artist back in the day. And even though like this wasn't the majority of what I listened to in high school, which was mostly like punk rock, I still held, Jeremy and Black Eyed Sceva, along with probably like Cosmos Express, up as like really talented songwriters.
I think a lot of people did based on, all the stuff I could find on the internet too. You're right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that like to talk about this band.
Yes, there are.
Well, let's jump into it. And I think just to, before we start, I think we're really only going to be talking about the 4 original songs on this. Like we might
Mhm.
touch on the live songs at the end, but we're really just
Yeah.
covering the original ones because we're hoping to do another episode one day with their first album and we'll talk about, those
Those songs there.
on that
Yeah.
one. First song is Ryan's Driveway. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, so it's a really energetic song. It starts off with like this whir, like if you're counting into the song, you'd be like 1, 2, 3, whir. Dun, 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 dun. Anyways, it starts off with this like wonderful energy. The first thing that you're hit with after that word kind of coming into it is Jeremy's guitar, obviously. Trying to think of how to describe his guitar in this song as I was listening to it. I was kind of coming back to the same way I would describe like a punk, what was going on with in a good punk song, for example. But it doesn't sound like that at all. It's just, it's completely different sounding. But it's kind of the same stuff that you're using with like palm mutes and a really fast moving guitar. One of the things that makes his playing style noticeable is just how much he's changing. Although, if you watch him play on the few live videos that are available of them, he uses a weird tuning so that he's really not moving that much, but he's getting a lot of change in what he's playing by just reshaping some chords without moving up and down the neck a lot. But it's a really active playing style, I'll say that. Although on this song, I think there are like 2 or 3 guitars kind of tracked over each other to kind of enhance that. And then behind that, there's the bass, which kind of has like this almost like grungy feel, I would say. To me, it's kind of a pretty simple rock song that almost sounds like Bryan Adams, but not like a Bryan Adams song, but like if Bryan Adams had come of age, in the early '90s and was writing this kind of music, I think maybe that's what Bryan Adams would have written at that time, you know, because it's a pretty simple, just kind of poppy rock song with it. That's kind of that kind of led by guitar.
But I love how, like, the guitar, it's kind of like a weird chord progression, right? Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't seem that melodic at first. You're like, what is this? But it really works for
Hmm.
the song.
Yeah. And as much as he moves around and it sounds like it's changing a lot, at the same time, it all kind of like flows together in a sense where it's just like it feels active and dynamic, but not distractingly, right? It is melodic, like you said. It kind of just fits together.
Yeah.
And also, did you read about people not liking Jeremy's vocals?
No,
Okay.
actually, I didn't see that.
In the few things I read that were critical, people didn't like his vocals, and even people said like my friends don't like his vocals. They can't get into it, you know. I don't understand that at all. I think his vocals are kind of great. They're just a little bit gruff. I think they're kind of just like a classic like American guitar rock kind of vocals.
Yeah, they don't stand out one way or the other to me, which is fine.
Yeah.
Like, it's totally fine for this type of music,
Yeah.
you know?
I mean, I think they're good. They stand out as good, but they're not like, oh, this is so unique, or hey, these are weird. You know, they're
Right.
nothing like that. Yeah. It's like I said, it's a very dynamic and energetic song, and there's some really good some parts of it that really stand out. There's some really good like backing vocals on the second chorus, and the bridge in the song kind of turns dark for some reason. There's no vocals over the bridge, but it just kind of like it slows the song down without actually slowing the tempo down, because it just goes into like this like little bit of darkness, kind of introspective type feel. Once again, kind of coming back to to Jeremy's guitar, like I said, he uses this weird tuning. Even him just playing a standard like rhythm type guitar lick, it sounds like he's doing something really complicated because you're not used to hearing these notes next to each other.
That's a good way to put it. That happens a
Yeah.
lot on this album. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that's, just his tuning alone, it kind of makes for his guitar sound. And it almost gives it like this math rocky feel.
Yeah, yeah, especially on a couple of the next couple songs.
Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, I definitely was kind of getting that vibe, which is strange because they talk about like the influence of Toad the Wet Sprocket and like kind of how they sound like, and that's when I listen to this, I don't hear that.
Right,
And
me
maybe
either.
slightly in a couple places, but yeah, some of these songs I hear a lot more almost like math rock, which they don't cite as an influence, but
No.
it sounds like it.
Right. They also say that Firehose is a big influence. I think Firehose I understand more. Like if you mixed Firehose with some of the interesting guitar work of math rock, that makes more sense to me as a description than Toad the Wet Sprocket.
Right.
Although, while I was listening to this, my wife came in and thought I was listening to Toad the Wet Sprocket, but I just don't hear it.
Huh.
I even went back and listened to Toad the Wet Sprocket again, and I was like, I just don't. I mean, a little bit like, okay, they're both like early 90s guitar rock. But other than that, I just don't hear it.
Right.
All that said, with all the interesting things that are going on in the song, it's really a pretty simple song structure. It's just verse, chorus, instrumental bridge, and verse and chorus. That's it.
To me, this is a song I don't understand because it's really catchy, it sticks in your head, but it doesn't feel like it should work that well.
Right.
Like, I still don't get it, but I'll be honest, I love hearing it. I think it's
Oh yeah.
I think it's a great song. Like, it just sticks in your head. It's kind of got
Mm-hmm.
a real hook, even though when you try to dissect it and you try to figure out what that is, you're like, I don't know, but it just, everything works together really well.
Yeah, it's nothing of the individual parts. It's what comes together as a whole.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the genius of the song, though, really.
I don't know about you. You, I know, pay more attention to lyrics, but I know when I first was listening to this, I don't think I caught them all correctly. Now they're not that hard to make out, like if you're really
Listen
focused
for
on
it.
them.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, oh, this is kind of edgy. They're talking about cigarettes.
Oh
'Cause
yeah. I
I
thought that
thought
was
they
really edgy when I
said
was a kid.
I thought they said made a friend cigarettes. I thought that's what that line was before. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
whoa, okay. That's not, they do say cigarettes, but that's not what they're saying before cigarettes. But
Yeah, I think the
yeah,
only really real lyric I misunderstood as a kid was it's the lyrics are I am indeed surrounded by self-proclaimed mental giants. I never got mental giants. I don't know. I like had a bunch of theories on what it was when I was a kid, but I don't remember any of them now. But I didn't ever hear mental giants. Although I think the words intellectual giants fit in there just as well, and he should have said that honestly.
yeah. You want to talk about the lyrics?
Yeah, let's do because they're interesting. All of Black Eyed Sceva's lyrics are interesting.
True.
And like I said, I didn't know all the lyrics when I was a kid, though they were easy to find. They were just in the book. You can just read them. And I probably did at one point, but I absolutely knew what the song was about, for example, which is just the chorus. So let me read the chorus here. Bated breath, cigarettes, in the cab of a Volkswagen van, 18, born again, arguing the origins of man. Teeth grit, fist clenched, I swing and strike the dashboard. How can they be so blind? They want to blaspheme my Lord. And then the last time they say, I won't let them anymore.
Now, before we get into the content of that, I do think he does a really, like, that's just well written. You
Yeah,
know, like
I agree.
the description and setting the scene in your mind with just
Hmm.
very few words and what's happening. Like, he does not use very many words to kind of paint that whole picture,
Right.
which
He
is,
doesn't, which
yeah,
is really artistic, really, really well done. Also, if you wanted to cover this topic, a lot of people would be tempted to take it in a direction that's really corny, but he just makes it about the scene, like you said. He just puts you in the same place he was,
right,
and kind of gets you to feel what he was feeling without saying, like, without trying to quote unquote write a song about this topic.
right.
This could easily have been a very corny song, but I would argue that hardly anyone could write a song that's less corny about this topic than Black Eyed Sceva has done here.
Well, and in a minute, I feel like we can get into it more. I may push back on the corniness a little bit with you.
Oh, not to say it's not corny today, especially, right?
Okay,
It's
okay.
corny. I'm saying that I would push against anyone who said that there is a less corny song about this subject.
True. Okay. All
Yeah,
right. Because I
yeah,
think when you take a couple steps back and look at it as a whole, it's like, wait
yeah.
a minute.
I agree. And before we do that, I want to address one thing to get it out of the way. In the second verse, there's the lines, I drew a thumbnail sketch of the cross on the window steam, and from that thumbnail sketch, inspiration came. Which lyrically is the end of the song.
Yeah.
So what's the inspiration?
Clifton, he saw a cross in the steam on the window. And somehow I don't know, God put the right words in his mouth and everything. He was inspired and it
Oh,
all
you think
worked
that's
out.
what he's saying?
That's what I took it as. That's why I thought, like,
That's
oh,
really
this got
interesting.
really corny.
That's really interesting. That's not what I took at all. See, I always thought that the inspiration was for this song as a kid.
Oh.
But I really like
See,
your interpretation that that inspiration came for how to convince these people that they are wrong and that they need to submit to God's word. I really like that.
yeah, see, that's what I took it, because they talk about mental, I was indeed, whatever, surrounded by self-proclaimed mental giants in Ryan's driveway. And like you said in the chorus, basically they're saying, arguing the origins of man. How can they
Yeah.
be so blind? Do they want to blaspheme my Lord? And I pretend that he's kind of like, mulling things over in a moment while they're talking, and he draws a cross or sees a cross already drawn on window steam. It's like, oh, And it's like, "Ah," inspiration came, and he wins his argument or whatever. Which is why, like, I thought, okay, this is cranking up the corniness of the song.
Yeah. That does make it more corny. You're correct. But I kind of like it as an interpretation because it fits the mold of this time in Christian music better, honestly.
Right. I was telling Clifton before we started recording, but to me, Black Eyed Sceva seems like a band that would be for people in your church who liked apologetics. You know, I feel like everybody has, and it's usually a guy. Some guy who's
Yeah,
like, "Oh, I'm really into apologetics." I feel like they would also really be into Black Eyed Sceva in some ways.
probably so. Yeah. Although I pushed it back a little bit against that because I think that Jeremy actually does struggle with some real things in a lot of his songs. It's not just this song is very apologetics based. I agree with that, but it's not his typical. I don't think.
Well, and I do get the sense from the few things I could read about them and then reading about their next release when they became Model Engine that
Hmm.
he's constantly reevaluating
Yes.
how he thinks about these things. So,
Yeah.
to be fair, you know,
Yeah.
I've definitely had my moments in the past like this too.
So I do want to read a little bit here about something Jeremy said, not about this song, but that is important to this song. He said, "I have trouble writing if something's not something that happened to me. I've tried to go, well, what if this were the situation? Let's write about that. All the songs are, and I was there, this happened sort of thing. The Lord has given me some good experiences. That's what my youth pastor always said when I was having tough times. This is what good songs are made of."
I like the way it starts, like the kind of snarky lyrics, like I was indeed surrounded by self-proclaimed mental giants.
Yes.
It's just that after that becomes a little too maybe self-serious.
A little bit. But then I really like how he sets the scene, like you said, bated breath, cigarettes in the cab of a Volkswagen van. I think there's a lot about this song that makes it very human.
Listen, I think it's a phenomenal song. I didn't even have this album, and I love, like, this song. I still can keep listening to this over and over, and it's
Yeah,
rare I can say that about most of the stuff we play. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
In fact, I'm gonna make a very bold statement, Clifton. I have not said this about any of them, but here's a bold one. I think this is definitely one of the top 10 Christian songs from the 1990s. I
It's
really
possible.
think this song is that good. Now, again, do I love every part of it? No, but does it reflect that era really well?
Yeah,
Yeah. Is it also super catchy and just works really well? Yes. I think
yeah,
it's a great song.
yeah. And if it hadn't been corny, it would have been on the radio probably
Yeah. I mean,
if someone heard it. Yeah.
I think that might have been one issue though, is that it was just a little what's the right word? Like, I want to say off kilter. I don't think that's right, but like the sound of it is just a little with the like you said with the kind of different guitar notes and stuff. It's
Hmm.
just maybe a little bit outside of the mainstream
True. That's
kind
true.
of thing.
At the time, even I felt like Black Eyed Sceva always felt a little vintage, right?
Okay.
Like even though their music is very much of the early '90s, they still had a little bit of a sound like, well, like Bryan Adams, kind of that classic three-piece American rock band kind of sound that's kind of that's in a way timeless. And it doesn't sound like the '80s, but it also doesn't sound I don't know, it just has this like older sound to it to me.
Okay.
I don't
I
know how
can
to
see
explain
that.
that anymore. There's some lyrics I do want to dig into though,
Okay.
which is to me what makes the song corny.
Okay.
How
Besides
can
the
they
anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
how can they be so blind they want to blaspheme my Lord?
Right.
This is kind of the emotional core of the song. It's the reason that fists clench, teeth grit, I swing and strike the dashboard, right?
Right.
Jeremy's having kind of like this is like physically upset about this conversation about the origins of men. Although as the song kind of sets up, it kind of sounds like, just some casual shit session among some friends relaxing and smoking, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, they're 18. Come on.
Right. And you remember back to being 18 and kind of having those shit sessions. And yeah, I also remember being highly invested in them at the time, I guess.
Right. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. But also looking back on it, I was like, those were just kind of shit sessions and they were kind of nice. But seeing a conversation about the origins of man as blasphemous to me is that's what makes the song corny to me. it seems weird to me coming from Jeremy, who's someone who's highly interested in philosophy and questioning things, that taking a very hardline stance, that you're not gonna follow the evidence, to uncomfortable truths, that you're just gonna well, I mean, let me rephrase that, just that if you take that hardline stance, the only thing you can be left with is kind of a dogmatic and unrelenting stand for what the myths written by ancient shepherds.
Well, as somebody who seems to be, like you said, into philosophy, you think he could hold one in one hand and one in the other, right? Like, okay,
Right,
I believe this, but other people believe this. Let's look at why they're saying this
right. But instead, he has a very
rather.
visceral reaction to someone blaspheming his Lord.
Well, and feeling like it's kind of almost like a threat to him, which I
Well,
think is,
exactly.
yeah, it really is, speaks a lot to what a lot of people I think felt, well, probably still now, but definitely back then, is like
Mhm.
anyone bringing up something like that, like, oh my God, like they talk about origins of man, evolution, that's like a real threat to my belief system rather than like,
Yeah.
okay, I may not believe that, but let's look at it this way. Like,
Right. You're right, I hadn't thought about that, that is the typical human reaction to having kind of a fundamental belief challenged is anger and even violence.
yeah, yeah. Not that he does strike the dashboard.
Exactly. He has a very physical reaction to this. That's what the song is about.
But I mean, we saw it, I think we saw it in our churches
Yeah.
growing up too, the same type of thing. And and I talk about apologetics, which is so funny. I haven't thought about that word in forever, but like, you get taught all these ways to kind of come at these arguments to try to win them rather than just listen to what people have to say. Like I
Right.
don't know, it's so hard for me now thinking back on this of like, why did this feel so threatening to people and why couldn't they just listen? And nothing says you have to, just because somebody's talking to you about, again, whatever evolution, that doesn't mean you have to
Mhm.
believe it.
I think even for me looking back just like right now as we're talking about this, I have kind of a sense of it feeling threatening because we were told that it was threatening and that we needed to be prepared to fight a war about it, right? I don't mean like a war, but I mean like we're trained like I don't know about you, but we were trained in apologetics in youth group. Like
Yeah.
they were literally classes on how to like almost like the like a telemarketer script, like if A then B, right? If someone says this is your response. If someone says that, this is your response. It's not you're not listening to what people said as exactly as you just said. You're not listening to what people have to say. You are trained to see it as a threat and to squash that threat.
I think there's always this thing with like e- evangelical Christianity of like always having to feel like you're under attack, and
Yes.
just, I mean, you still see it today. I mean, in some ways, I think that is part of like, not to get too into this, but like the appeal of Trump and some of those
Mhm.
things is kind of this like, oh, somebody's standing up and pushing back and fighting for me now because I always feel under attack. And so I
Right.
think that's, you definitely kind of, seeing that in the song and definitely thinking back on culture at the time. It was, even though it's so weird, right? Like Christians are the majority in this country. I'm pretty sure still are, definitely were
Mhm.
in the 90s, but yet always under attack. I don't
Yeah,
know.
and because, I mean, the first part of a call to action is to set up a grievance or a feeling of being attacked, right? And so, as a church, especially an evangelical church, which requires action, this isn't a Catholic church where you come in on Sunday and you go home, right? This is an evangelical church where you're supposed to be involved and to do things. And so, to give that call to action, you have to set up the first part of it, which is this is why we're taking action because we are under attack. And honestly, it's just like it's lazy and easy to say we're under attack. That's an easy way to get someone excited about doing something. It's more easy than this is the right thing to do or this is for the good of all mankind. I would say that if you ever listen to Jesus, he's definitely more the good of all mankind kind of person, but we're under attack is just easy. And it's a cheap, fast way. Well, let me say, it's the fast food of of action statements or of calls to action.
It's also a really good way for a couple of things. One, to get people to, you know, buy into your whatever you're selling
Mhm.
with this. Like it's a good way to keep them coming back.
Right.
If there's always this kind of battle to fight, rather than like love your neighbor as yourself, love everyone. Like that's a
Yeah.
much better message, but it's not doesn't nearly like kind of motivate people to, you know,
Yeah. It
take
does
action like you said
yeah,
or buy stuff.
it doesn't bring in the tithes or, put butts in seats.
Yeah, and not and to be fair, I really now some definitely were, but I don't think all I'm not we're painting with a really broad brush. I don't think every Christian minister and people involved at the time was always about money or trying to make money with that. But
Hmm.
it is easier to you know make that happen when you've got this message coming across.
I'm very specifically thinking of Dr. Robert Jeffress, my pastor, growing up. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I was thinking about that the other day, Clifton. I feel like we need to get into that more on some episode because some people listening probably already recognize that name and all of its kind of connotations now.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. We need to come back to that because
Okay. We'll try to come back to that someday. For now, I'll just say Fox News contributor Robert Jeffress. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I'm glad you pointed that out in the song though, because it's and even just the fact that he uses the word blaspheme, like
Mhm.
I don't know, it seems a little strong, man. You're having like
It is.
a conversation, yeah, like you said, 18-year-olds with cigarettes in the driveway, like come
And
on.
to me, the choice of the word blaspheme is as much a part of the visceral reaction as punching the dashboard.
Good point. All that being said, I still think this is a great song.
It's a great song.
It's the tough thing about going back to a lot of this. It's like some of it's pretty problematic, but you
Yeah.
know, it just musically like, yeah, this is a good one.
It is.
Um,
Very much enjoyed listening to it.
well, let's go to the second song, which is called Ecumenical, which I was telling Clifton as we were starting this. I definitely did not know what that word meant back then,
Yeah.
but I do now.
Yep.
Which already, if you know what that word means, should tell you quite a bit about what the song is about.
What the song's about. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. It is exactly what the song is about. So the song starts off with just like kind of like two drum beats, like doing like you know one of those entry kind of things, and the vocals come in like just a smidge before the rest of the band, and so it just kind of all starts at once. And Jeremy's once again doing this arpeggiated thing on the guitar, which is probably really simple, but once again, kind of because of that weird tuning of his, it brings out like this almost math rocky feel. And there's also like a darker, more subdued tone to this song. No, I wouldn't call it dark, but it's just darker. Kind of, and we'll get to the lyrics, but they're kind of very introspective and thinky. And I think that kind of just goes hand in hand with the more subdued tone of this song.
At what price your belief? How will you stand against the devil's schemes? For the struggle we face is not against flesh and blood, as if that weren't enough.
And I forgot to mention it I mentioned about the bass sounding kind of grungy in the last song, but the bass is on this song especially a highlight because I should say especially the first half of the song, the guitar is really just doing the same thing, and it's really the bass that gives this song any dynamics that it has. Like I said, other than that, it kind of just stays in place for the first half, and it's kind of just a vehicle for the lyrics. Which brings us to the second half, which is all instrumental. It's just to me the second half that's instrumental is the interesting part of the song, more than the lyric vehicle that the first half is. And the bridge even kind of gets like this like pseudo heavy style going on. It's like it kind of uses the style of like almost like a hardcore guitar, but without the distortion, just the same kind of like light overdrive that Jeremy uses the rest of the time. And so it has this very, very peculiar feel to it. But in this whole second half, which that's the instrumental, the guitars are interesting, the bass is all over the place, and the drums are particularly crazy, and it just comes together to feel like a math rock song, honestly.
Yeah, I even sent it to Clifton when we were a little bit talking about this. It reminded me of this 90s emo math rock band I like called Ethel Meserve, and I
Mhm.
was playing part of that, and it is again, I don't know that they listen to each other or anything like that, but it's just
Right.
similar type vibe with the guitar work.
Yeah. I don't think that guy was using a weird tuning. I think he was doing a lot of work to get that sound. Where Jeremy's getting here kind of with his weird tuning, he's kind of getting a similar sound in a lazy way.
Yeah. And I even wrote in my notes too. I said the bridge is very emo sounding in a
Yeah.
way, and I know this is not an emo band, but that
Nope.
just reminds me of that. And it kind of made me wonder like more what directions they could have gone if they
Mhm.
kind of followed that style a
Yeah.
little more.
And even though they list kind of like Firehose and Toad the Wet Sprocket as their main influences, you hear so much. I don't know if it's on purpose, but you hear so much other influences in this band. And they even talk about that most of the things that they listen to are kind of local bands in the area, which would explain kind of a more diverse set of influences, right? They're not just listening to the music they like; they kind of are a fan of local music, so they listen to all kinds of things. But I mean, you hear everything from like classic American three-piece band rock in this thing to, as you said, kind of an emo influence, kind of even a DC 80s punk influence at certain times, like not outright, but just kind of the feel of it.
Yeah. This is a song I kind of felt like he had the lyrics and then he tried to kind of like make it fit with the music. So like the
Yeah.
chorus where he's like unity in what is it?
Unity in what is essential. Liberty in non-essentials. And in all things. And in all things. And in all things. And in all things charity.
It's impressive. It's not nearly as catchy as Ryan's Driveway.
No.
Um, but considering the lyrical content, not terrible with the way he kind of made it fit into the song.
Yeah. It's I'll even say it's a more boring song than Ryan's Driveway, but it's not a boring song. It's a good song.
Yeah.
Although I will say it's not one that I remembered. I mean, I remember it being there, and I remember being called ecumenical, but I didn't remember I couldn't remember the chorus or anything like that. Even though the chorus it stands out in the song. Yeah, that unity and what's essential, liberty and the non-essentials. Yeah,
Like, I feel like if Black Eyed Sceva got together for a reunion show, this might not make the set list. You know?
right. It would not. Correct. You want to go over the lyrics though?
Yeah.
So this is definitely what I think about when I think of a Black Eyed Sceva song lyrically. Fairly philosophical, overthinking things, but maybe in a good way. And always trying to kind of add kind of like a human element to that overthinking as well. The lyrics aren't long, so let me just read them here. He says, "At what price your belief? How will you stand against the devil's schemes? For the struggle we face is not against flesh and blood, as if that weren't enough. Was it a cross or a tree? What's it matter if it's Saturday or Sunday? For what's more, what we share or what tears us apart? Etch this creed upon your heart. Unity in what is essential, liberty in non-essentials, and in all things, charity." It's kind of just about unity of the church and not letting minor dogma create rifts and splits, which is exactly what ecumenical means. It just means, from Webster's, it means promoting or relating to unity among the world's Christian churches. So it's a big topic, because you could say that dogmatic rifts and splits is basically the entire history of the church.
Yeah. True. I also how do I say this? I had trouble squaring this a little bit because he seems like, hey, let's all just get along. These things aren't
Mhm.
worth arguing about. But then I'm thinking back to the song prior, and I'm like, yeah, but that whole
Exactly.
song was about an argument.
No, exactly,
So,
because the Catholics would disagree with that first song because they don't have a problem with evolution because they just see that as how God created.
so this one is, I don't know, it's just, we don't need to argue, everyone get along.
Mhm.
Unless we're arguing about something I care about, then we need to, I don't know.
Yeah. And here's my big question this was my big note was, Who gets to define if something is essential or non-essential?
Well, and that's the whole problem, right? Because,
Mhm.
you know, for certain denominations, something is really essential, and
Right.
other ones, it's not.
And I think he tries to answer that with kind of the follow-up line, which is, "And in all things charity." I think he's saying there that we should lean towards accepting each other, but at the same time, once again, it's not a question of just small differences. Some people something that you think is a small difference, someone else may think is a salvation-defining difference, right? I mean, Baptists literally believe that you can't go to heaven unless you've been dunked underwater after you accepted Jesus into your heart.
Okay, so Clifton, let me quiz you. Think back to like high school Clifton. All right,
Mhm.
I'm going to ask you about some denominations. You tell me if they would be Christian or not. You ready?
All right.
Okay, Methodist,
No,
Lutheran,
probably not.
Presbyterian.
Maybe.
Okay, how about Mormon?
No. They're funny.
How about Seventh-day Adventist?
I don't think I knew enough about Seventh-day Adventists at the time, honestly, but probably
Okay,
not.
Catholic.
No.
Like the largest group of believers
Yeah.
in the world. Yeah, it's funny, right? And I remember growing up, especially the Mormon one for us, you know, we'd always be like, "Oh no, they believe really weird stuff." And it's like,
Mhm.
pause for a second. They believe really weird stuff because,
Right.
you know, we're talking about like, you know, eating flesh, drinking blood, all kinds of really, when you think about it, really bizarre stuff.
Mhm.
But cool. They believe, yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's,
And it
yeah.
never occurred to you to turn that same critical eye on your own beliefs, you know,
Exactly,
it's
exactly, because
just
that was what was true,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
And to do so would be blasphemous.
yeah, would and would upset, Jeremy. Yeah, you know, but it is very that's kind of the core here of what my problem with this song is that it's a very sweet stance, I guess. It's a very innocent kind of stance, but it's not practical. I do like the second. I didn't read the second verse earlier. The second verse is, or maybe the third verse. I don't know. But it is victims of religion be forewarned when they try to exchange substance for form. Will you recognize the devils without their horns? They're so much harder to see, and they do so much harm.
I do like that line, "Try to exchange substance for form."
Mhm.
He has some good lines
Oh,
throughout this, yeah.
I think that entire verse is fantastic. It's also fantastically troublesome to the first part of the song.
Right.
Because he says, "Will you recognize the devils without their horns?" Well, once again, what's the devil? Which are the parts that do harm, even though they're harder to see? You know, who gets to define these things? Which part of which branch of the church defines these things?
Yeah.
It also reminds me that whole verse reminds me of kind of an exchange I had with a high school friend that I was visiting my freshman year of college. We were driving around, and he pointed at a church, and he said, "They accept gays at that church. They're very loving, and they're going to love those people straight to hell."
Oh, wow. Wow.
So who gets to decide if being loving is something that does harm or if it's exactly what God told you to do?
Great point. Ooh, I can't believe, I mean, I don't even know who you're talking about, but I can totally believe he said that, but I'm at the same time like, wow, it's a lot to
Yeah. I mean, and that was just some little off the wall thing, and it's just always stuck with me.
as if loving someone could be, anyway, we can go
I
on
know
about
it's
that for all
it's
day, right?
there's so many layers to this, right? Because on one hand, is loving them hiding them from the harsh truth of God's word, you know, or is loving them exactly what Jesus told you to do?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the latter. To me, that seems, and it seems also a lot simpler.
Hmm. Yeah,
Just love people. Pretty easy.
yeah.
But again, you're right. It doesn't give people a lot of stuff to do. I mean, that is something you do, and that's very important. But I don't know. It's not bringing people back to church every Sunday to get more
Once
instructions.
again, exactly. It's easier to create in someone a sense of victimhood that they need to fight against than it is to create in someone a sense of love that they need to serve with.
Yeah. What do you think about the ending of this song with kind of the little guitar stuff that just seems to go on kind of for a while before it fades out?
Like I said, I think the second half instrumental is the better part of this song.
Okay.
It's once again, it's not amazing, but it's very listenable.
So, if you don't mind, I want to just talk about the next song, Twain, just for a second, because unlike Clifton, I'd never heard this song until we listened to it for this, and so here's my notes for this song. I said, "Oh, this is a cool sounding build up to shouting Twain." I said, "Wait, did he really just shout Twain? Wait, is he talking about the author?" And yes, he is. And it sounds so like the build up for the beginning of the song sounds really cool. And then I'm like, oh, he's getting like aggressive and he's shouting something. And then, yeah, it's about
Mhm.
the author.
Yeah, so my notes before the song as it was coming on, I wrote, "Yay!" The only thing I remember about this song is Twain, which is how the song starts.
Right.
And it's a really angry song. Jeremy is so mad. The bass is as great as Jeremy's guitar playing always is. The bass is kind of the hidden hero of this song, in that it kind of ties everything together and also adds a lot of dynamics at the same time. It's really great. I mean, the drumming's really great too. Not to say that. I mean, when you have a 3-piece band, no one can afford to slack off.
True.
But what's interesting about that is that the bass is really interesting, but then the guitar also stays towards the bass side of this of things on this song as well for the most part. And once again, it kind of has a kind of math rocky sound, not with weird time signatures or anything like that, just with the kind of like that structure of how you move on the guitar and well, the note playing that isn't anything related to a scale. There's not a lot to say about the song, though. It's kind of just the same thing over and over again. It's a harder song. But then after kind of most of the angry lyrics are delivered, it gets into like this really pretty verse. It kind of just mellows out for a second into this pretty verse where Jeremy says, "The pen that Sam dipped in the ink has been dripped, and it's staining everyone who reads it."
Since dripped, and it's staining everyone who reads it.
Twain.
Yeah.
And Jeremy's just so mad.
And I just remember the next thing I wrote was like, why is he mad at Mark Twain? Like, of all people to be mad at?
Should we talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like this one you kind of have to explain more. Because
Definitely.
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing if not. And he pretty much lays it out for you in the song. It's not a lot of mystery.
Yeah, it's super simple. Let me read the lyrics because they're not very long here. Twain, the riverboat genius, although I always thought that said the little boy genius, but it's the riverboat genius, shipwrecked when he ran into God. Your case was misrepresented. Beware when you read Letters from the Earth. Your case was presented wrong by Twain. The pen that Sam dipped, and the ink has been dripped, and now it's staining everyone who reads it. That's it.
Beware when you read Letters from the Earth.
Right.
So what is Letters from the Earth?
It's a book. Well, not really a book. It's not very long.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, from Mark Twain. Have you ever read it?
I started looking through it for this, and I just could not finish it.
Yeah, I couldn't. I've always liked Twain's ideas, but I've never been able to read him. I don't know. There's something about his writing style that never does well with me. I will read here. Jeremy does talk about this song though in one of the interviews that we found. He says, "There's a guy in town who's a philosophy professor notorious for bashing Christians, which sounds very God's Not Dead. He spends a couple of weeks, maybe a month, out of his introductory philosophy class, and he writes, God, glorious Father, or gruesome fiend. And he spends his entire time each day telling you why God is a gruesome fiend. And the people in there aren't Christians to start with 90% of the time. And I always liked Mark Twain growing up until I read his philosophical stuff. I agreed with a lot of what he was pointing out. The incongruities in the church, hypocrisy and stuff like that. Then, when he started talking about God, he screwed up." That's it. That's all I have to say about it.
I know that Letters from the Earth is sarcastic. I also know that Mark
Mhm.
Twain wrote it, I believe, after his wife had died, and
Daughter, I think.
yeah,
Maybe his wife and daughter, I forget.
it was like a really tough time for him, and I
Mhm.
think it was kind of like a way to kind of process and move through all that.
Mhm.
Again, I guess I'm just having trouble understanding why Jeremy can't just appreciate Mark Twain and not have to get so upset about Mark Twain's views on God.
And
You know?
he seems to think that it's staining everyone who reads it, that it's hurting people. Yeah.
I mean, do you know anyone who's gonna like pick up this book by Mark Twain and suddenly gonna change their outlook on God? Like, I just find this. I don't think this is gonna have much of an effect on people, especially in the current day.
I don't know. I think it could be part of a journey away from believing.
Okay, fair.
Yeah. I don't think you're gonna find it as a reader and then be like, you know what? Like if you're not
Yeah.
if you're not looking, if you're not questioning things, you're not gonna read it and be like, I think he's right. Because like I said, it's very sarcastic. It's not a real philosophical examination. It's more just like an angry, sarcastic outburst.
Well, I also don't think this song is gonna pull you back the
No.
correct direction.
Well, yeah. What's the point of this song other than just to express anger?
Right, he's just mad at Twain. It's like
Yeah.
he maybe maybe where he really liked Mark Twain growing up, like
Maybe
read
so.
a ton of his books, is into it, and then saw this and felt betrayed, kind of thing.
But then again, he didn't grow up Christian, so maybe he read Twain when he was young, and it wasn't like a big deal for him,
Yeah.
But because I mean, Mark Twain isn't, from what I remember, he's not hardline in any of his books. He's not a believer, though. Very obviously, I mean,
Or
You know,
not in the way that Christians were in the evangelical Christians were in the 1990s.
right. Yeah, definitely not. To me, it wouldn't like. It never surprised me that Mark Twain had these beliefs when I found out that when I like I said, I never read Letters from Earth, but I do know what it's about, and it never surprised me that was what Mark Twain did.
Yeah, but it's an okay song. You don't forget it because of the thing Twain.
So mad.
But yeah, I don't. Anyway, I don't think I've
Yeah.
ever heard another song written that's angry at Mark Twain. So there's that. But
Yeah, I mean that is a unique contribution of Jeremy Post to the world of music.
well, you want to talk about Soapbox?
Yeah, this is the song I probably remember the least before I listened to it of the original songs on the EP. Although when it got to like, I think at one point he's like spit shine or something like that, and then like, oh yeah, and it's like all of a sudden it rushed back to me because it's just a really unique kind of vocal there.
Send down your soapbox. Cover every sign of the orthodox. Spit shine and overhyped.
And also kind of on the chorus, there's a back and forth between background vocals doing part of the chorus and Jeremy screaming part of the vocals for the chorus.
I felt like this is kind of the most normal sounding out of the 4 songs, if you know what I
Yes.
mean. Just kind of traditional. It's not as weird, math rocky, or
Hmm.
strange like that. This is more just kind of a
Agreed.
straight ahead, normal sounding song.
3-piece American rock band song.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. Although it's kind of so normal that I spent most of my time listening to this, kind of just examining his guitar style, honestly, which is not that different from the other songs, but it doesn't sound math rock in this one.
Yeah.
It's just there's something about it. I think that maybe it's the way that it interacts with the drums or the way it interacts with the bass, but in this song it just sounds kind of like an indie rock band, just like plain straightforward, kind of 3-piece lo-fi rock and roll.
I will say this might be the only time, also in a rock song, I've ever heard anybody say the word syntax. So there's
very
that.
very awkwardly stumble over the word syntax.
Yeah. And I will say this one, I had the most trouble kind of figuring out what the lyrics meant.
Yeah, I don't know.
Which in some ways I kind of liked it more because it's less on the nose than the
Mhm.
other songs. But yeah, I was struggling with this one.
Yeah. Let me read the lyrics again once again here. They're a little bit longer than some of the other songs, but not long. He says, "Sand down your soapbox, cover every sign of the orthodox, spit shined and overhyped, gone to bid the good news goodbye. Where does this whole notion of innocence come from? The line between rhetoric and reality has been too blurred. Something grievous has occurred, when the chosen ones have chosen wrong, and the favorite sons have come undone. Renew my dissatisfaction for ideas without traction, sentences without syntax, catchphrases that no longer catch. Martyrs, mystics, saints, and friends, take the narrower of the roads ahead."
I like a lot of kind of lines in that. Like even the
Mhm.
first one, "Sand down your soapbox," is a
Yeah,
great
it is a great line.
great line. It's kind of quite a bit to think about, but I'm having trouble putting it all together. Like what's he trying to say through
Mhm.
this?
And I really liked that. Like I said before, I really like that. Spit shined and overhyped. I mean, obviously, I didn't want to use the word upset again here, but I think he's upset again here. But he's talking about someone he thinks has gone astray and is leading people astray, or maybe even a whole movement of Christianity that's leading people astray. That's kind of what I get from it. Gone to bid the good news goodbye. That's what I don't think anyone. I don't think he's saying that someone meant to do that, but that's what they've done. And nothing else in here except for the chorus really gives anything away about what it could be, because everything is very vague, right? And renew my dissatisfaction for ideas without traction, sentences without syntax, kept phrases that no longer catch. But so the question comes down to where does this whole notion of innocence come from mean? Is he suggesting that, and maybe I'm reading too much into this, is he suggesting that inherited guilt is obvious on its face? So much so that, you know, to even think about an idea of innocence is baffling to him?
No idea.
Yeah. And I kind of had a hard time not seeing it in the wake of the last episode, Luxury, and their kind of different take on Christianity, which is very innocence based. So that's why it occurred to me.
Yeah. I think you're probably right with just some of the other stuff he says. I definitely think he's an original sin type guy.
Very much. Yes.
So that makes sense. I guess he seems kind of hopeful in the last line, and friends take the narrower of roads ahead. Like
Hmm.
some people are still going to do the right thing. But
It seemed like a instruction to me.
like the way you say it, like friends take the
Yes,
narrower of roads ahead. I see what you're
exactly.
saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know though. I don't know what it's about.
I kind of think you're right. Maybe it's like people have kind of gone astray from what he sees as
Hmm.
right, and trying to get them back on the right path. Renew my dissatisfaction for ideas without traction. So like get me, I want to be frustrated with these things that don't matter or whatever, and want to be back on the narrow road. Maybe. I don't know.
Once again, if we look at it in the light of ecumenical, it's very looking at the things that divide.
Yeah, true. Of course you could say he's being divisive by thinking
Yeah,
about that, but
because he gets to define What is essential and what is not essential?
Yeah.
Full circle.
Boom. There are, what, 4 other songs? 5 other songs on that?
Yeah, so there's eight in total. So there's 3 live songs after this, all of them from Way Before the Flood, their first album. And then there's a cover of Invisible Sun by the Police. Or maybe it's just Sting, I forget.
And the live songs sound pretty good, actually. They recorded them
Yeah.
well.
And there's a lot of energy to them, I think, that's also not on their first album. The live recordings capture a different side of Black Eyed Sceva that's not on that first album, and really gives you a different appreciation for those songs. I think it was a good choice to put them on there.
I think I remember, maybe vaguely hearing their first album once and thinking it was a lot slower. In my mind, they were a slower sounding band. And then I heard this and was like, well, maybe I don't remember it correctly. But
Right, yeah.
let's talk about the overall album.
I went through a lot of feelings after listening to this EP each time, kind of. My first time through, I was thinking that, without the live songs, this is kind of a vehicle for Ryan's Driveway. And the other songs are, they're nice, but they're nothing that's gonna grab on to anybody. I thought that it wasn't bad overall, but I wasn't sure why I loved it back in the day. And if I just wanted to listen to Ryan's Driveway, I could listen to Take Time to Listen Volume 2 and listen to some other great songs, right? But there was something that I definitely enjoyed about the sound and the style of this album that was separate from just that one song. And then as I listened to it more in preparation for this episode, I really started to enjoy the songs more. Once again, none of them are amazing songs, but I think that style really started to grab me again. There's something really, really peculiar and interesting about the style of this band. There's so much going on, and kind of the tension between what each of the 3 musicians is doing is really interesting, and honestly, it creates tension kind of in the music.
No, they're clearly a talented band. This is not like the Audio Adrenaline album we did a few episodes back, where you're like, like nothing really stood out musically, or like, this
Right.
is like, okay, they're very talented at what they're doing, and clearly, like, he's a good lyricist too.
Right.
So yeah, I do kind of feel like in some ways it's a vehicle for Ryan's Driveway, just because that song is so good. Like, if you didn't have that song on this album, we probably would not be talking about it.
No, we wouldn't be. That's true.
Great band. This is one of those bands that I felt like I knew a lot of people that really liked. Like, this is one of those bands that a lot of people had them as their favorite band, including the guys in Plank Eye. I think I remember reading an interview and they all said, like, Black Eyed Sceva was their favorite band. And I could see why.
Yeah. And, reading online, like I said, a lot of people talk about this band and they love it. Some people are drawn to the live show. Like, a lot of people talk about these guys live, which is why I think it was a good choice to put those 3 live songs on here, because they seem to be a really good live band. That they perform with energy and with a sense of urgency, maybe. And a lot of people also talked about the lyrics, that they remember loving these lyrics, and not just as Jay accused of loving apologetics type stuff, but loving kind of the thinking part of this, not like the rote repetition of apologetics or anything like that, but just the really sitting down and putting a human face to the thinking about these subjects.
You want to talk about the packaging?
Yeah, the cover art is, in my opinion, fantastic. It's basically this like old 80s light blue, not in great shape passenger van. Has a broken turn signal on it and a bunch of rust on it, and it's horizontal on the cover and kind of cut out up against a backdrop of a beachside town, so that it looks like it's flying away from the beachside town.
Right.
And I think it's just a great cover. Yeah.
Is the 50,000 miles, you think, like how much they drove in that van since they toured so
Yes.
much?
They actually did. That's actually in one of the interviews where they talk about that. They said it's a reference to how much they drove in that van. Yes.
No, I think the cover's pretty good. I don't just love the font at the bottom with
Yeah.
their name, but I like the cover, and it grabbed my attention more than the other album cover, than their first album for me.
Yeah, there's some kind of absurd and nice about the cover.
And I thought the layout, like, inside it's not terrible. It's not like blowing my mind, but it's not, we've certainly seen worse.
Yeah, so on the inside, it features 3 of the pages are pictures of, like, the first one's a picture of a guitar, an old Dan Electro, leaning up against a very vintage-looking amp. It's actually an old Silvertone amp, and it says Jeremy Post underneath it, and it's kind of all on this, like, not all the way black, but, like, kind of a vintagey-looking black kind of, background. And the second page has a picture of an old bass, and it's like an old Japanese, like, aria or Taisco bass, something like that, leaning up against a bass amp, which is probably just like a early '90s, like, crate amp, honestly, and it has, Brad McCarter, his name on there. And then there's a drum set, and it says, Brent Nims, and that's kind of how they did the credits on this, honestly. Then there's one sheet that has just all the lyrics to those 4 songs that we covered. It says music by Black Eyed Sceva, lyrics Jeremy. And of course, there's a credits page, which is kind of one of the funnier credits page I've ever read. Do you read this?
Yeah, go on.
So it has all the recording information recorded February 10th and 11th, 1996 at Dean School Chapel, which they probably recorded it live then. They probably recorded it as a live band. It says additional tracks and mixing were done at Bruce's bedroom.
Right.
Soapbox re-recorded and mixed at Riviera Studios after Bruce's 12-track Ate the Master.
There we go.
Which is kind of great. And then it has the credits here for the live tracks where they were recorded. And they do thank some bands, though. They thank Plank Eye, Punching Judy, Mothership Brotherhood is at House. And they thank Frank and Liana. Is that how you say that?
Maybe.
Tate?
It's my guess, yeah.
That's the guy who runs 5 Minute Walk and his wife, 5 Minute Walk and Sanctuary Ministries. Masaki, who is part of Dime Store Profits and did most of the recording for most 5 Minute Walk albums, but not this one.
So, where are they now?
After releasing 5 Years in November of 1996, drummer Brent Nims left the band, but on good terms. In an interview with Phantom Tollbooth, Jeremy said, "There are definitely some issues that need to be addressed, but there was nothing violent or harsh. We still live with Brent." Which is also kind of, you look at, where Jeremy said that they kind of released this to kind of hold fans over, because as he says here, we had some issues that were causing us to be unproductive. I kind of take those two together, and that's kind of interesting. I don't know what it means or anything like that, but it's an interesting vagueness about that. Because of confusion over how to pronounce Sceva or Skiva, the band decided to change their name to something with the word engine in it, and eventually landed on Model Engine, which I find kind of interesting because just a year or so before, they were really excited about the name, in that one interview.
Maybe after all the touring and people constantly saying it wrong, they thought,
They also said that when they went to Europe, that a lot of the non-English speaking countries would just spell the name Skeva. Model Engine released an album about a year after this one called The Lean Years Tradition on Cerebellum, which is an imprint of 5 Minute Walk. And once again, they toured a lot. There's so many stories out there about seeing Black Eyed Sceva and Model Engine live and being blown away by it. But things got hard. 5 Minute Walk started having trouble because of a distribution deal with Warner Brothers a few years later. And in 2000, the band kind of broke up in some heartache and just kind of a disillusionment, I think. I did find an update from Brad that was a reply to a blog post that I found on the Wayback Machine from December 2003. I'm going to read that for you here. He said, "I don't ordinarily go in search of Black Eyed Sceva or Model Engine threads. In fact, I don't think I ever have, but I was curious if Model Engine could still be found outside of the deep discount bin. VH1, for some reason, hasn't called us to film our Where Are They Now segment yet. While we hold our breath, I can tell you that both Jeremy and I went on to life beyond music. We both are commercial pilots, myself in corporate flying, and Jeremy as a charter jet captain. None of either of our coworkers believed that there ever was a band. We still play our instruments, though relatively privately now. We consider it a great privilege to have had the chance to play our music for fans who were eager to hear what we had to offer. I'm glad to see that a few still exist. I will let Jeremy know that I'm not the only one who thinks he's a great songwriter. Thanks for all your kind words." And that's the last update we had 19 years ago.
Yeah, this is crazy to me because Jeremy's a very good songwriter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's not put anything else out into the world since then, and he's very hard to find. I mean, I think I found someone about the right age that lives in California that's a pilot when I was like Googling, but I mean, just on one of those like people search sites, like but nothing like,
yeah.
no Facebook, no anything to give us like a clue, even what he looks like now, much less
Mhm.
like music or anything. And so if anyone's listening and knows any
Yeah.
of these guys, we would love, and I know we're speaking for a large group of people, would love to hear more music or anything that's been done.
Yeah. Or just what's going on with the guys. Yeah.
Yeah, because almost every band we've done, if we've heard from the band members, they've all like basically have some music post that band that they'd
Mhm.
love to share and get out. And this, so I'm shocked that somewhere there's not more.
Yeah. I agree.
That's Black Eyed Sceva.
It is. For now.
Clifton, what are we listening to next time?
We're going to listen to something we don't do very often, a Tooth and Nail album. The Blamed album, Frail, from 1995.
I love that album. I'm very curious to see what you will think about it.
Yeah, because I have not heard it. I was a fan of Left Out, but I'd never listened to The Blamed for some reason. I mean, I did, but not,
Yeah.
regularly.
Yeah.
All right. I'm looking forward to it.
Good. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Your Music Saved Us.
If you enjoyed your time with us, please leave a review or share this episode. You can visit our website, yourmusicsavedus.com, to find all the ways to listen. We're on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Join our Facebook group or follow us to keep up with the latest or interact with us, or send complaints and disagreements to yourmusicsavedus@gmail.com.
The music in this episode is the work of Black Eyed Sceva and is used with apologies, not permission.
I don't know how to support these guys. There's nothing out there these days.
But if you can find it, support it, share the music on YouTube or anything else.
Send it to us.
Yeah.
All right. Everyone have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Quick question, and I'm probably I'm asking it's the wrong time in the episode, but the 50,000 Miles Davis, did they just throw Davis on the end because of Miles Davis, a musician? Is this just the joke?
It's portmanteau, yeah.
Okay. Just, all right. Just trying to clarify.